Okay, your own, Hannah. Stories of Children, Hannah Holland Bird.
Okay. Well, there was a guy, a man. His name was Adonis. And everybody made fun of him because his name was funny. And they made fun of his name in high school, in middle school, and in elementary school. And so when he went to college, he thought that everybody was going to hate him. But there at college, there were people with even sillier names like Jahulabang and Willie Mixer. And no one made fun of his name because his name was perfectly normal. So he went to college and he got a Bachelor of Arts in Literature, and then he went to Portland, Oregon, and he got a house, and he just started living there, and eventually he got a job as a reporter at a newspaper, but he still hated his life because he didn't have any friends, and he just didn't like his life very much. So he packed up and he went to Albuquerque, and the same thing happened. And then he went to Washington, D.C., and he became a writer for the mayor. And he was a very good writer for the mayor. And while he was in the mayor's office, one day, a lady came in, and she pushed him. And she just pushed him without any reason. She didn't run into him, she just pushed him. And every day after that, when he was in his office, she would come and push him. And then one day, he went to a restaurant called Big Ben's, and the lady came in again and pushed him again. And then one night he went, and the pushes were very, very hard, and he just hated them because they hurt. And he was tired of being bullied. So he ran for mayor, and he won. And then he became very important, and he had bodyguards and made a lot of money. And then, on the first day that he was elected, the lady came in and pushed him more. And so his bodyguards pushed her back. And they had a push fest. They pushed each other until everyone fell down. And then the guy got old and he died. And the lady came and he died of a heart attack. And the lady came and she looked at his grave, and then she dug a big hole next to it, and she put herself in there, and then she just lived there for a while, and her friends brought her bread and some Kalamata olives, and she just ate there and sat there. And every day she would kick the walls of her hole, and every day she would get one step closer to being almost in the grave of the other guy. And so she kept pushing until she made a tunnel. And then she went in there, and she got his bone, his arm bone, and one finger bone, and his skull. And then she went and she traveled all over the world with them, and she sold them to some merchants who were selling skulls and bones to weird scientists. And so the merchant was selling his stuff one day, and he had the skull, and he had the finger bone and the arm bone. And this guy came by, and he was a famous scientist named Robert Cass. And he bought it and took it back to his castle because it was in England and he had a castle. And he was kind of crazy, and he got crazier because he lived there all alone. And it was like a haunted place. And so he started talking to the skeleton. And he would just talk to the skeleton every day for a long time. Sometimes he would talk to him for up to 10 hours. And one day the skeleton started talking back. But the skeleton would, in every sentence that he said, the skeleton said he would mention something white. So for example, one of his sentences would be, "I like snow," which is white. Or he would say, "There is a white door there." And he would just say silly stuff like that, and then one day the color changed to red. So he would say, "I like red steak," and "I like red roses." And so the scientists became really crazy, and one day someone came in and just dragged him away, kicking and screaming, because he was too crazy, and they put him in an asylum, and he died. But the skull stayed there for a while, and it kept on talking even though there was no one there to listen to it. And it kept talking about the color blue. So it would say, "I have a blue rug in my house." Or he would say, "I like to wear blue jackets." And so, because he was sad, that's why he was talking about blue things. And then one day, the skull jumped off the table and rolled to the door, and someone found it, and it was a very rich lady who was very pampered, and she got the skull and took it back to her mansion. And one day she took it to her boyfriend, who was a scientist, and he said it was the skull of the old mayor of New York City. And
DC.
then, mayor of DC. And so she was the great-great-granddaughter of the lady who had been pushing him, who had pushed him and pushed him all his life, and who had gotten the skull. And she had some of her great-great-grandmother's weird traits. And so she started breaking apart the skull and carving a hole in it. And by this time, the arm bone and the finger bone were like somewhere else. And so she started.
No.
So she was the great-great-granddaughter of the lady who pushed him. And so she started carving a little hole in the skull, and one day she put it on herself, because she had a very small head. And she walked around town with the skull on her head. And then, as the day went on, the skull started to become her own head. And it kind of merged into her head, so it was her head. The skull was her head. And then she just died, and someone came and buried her, but then the skull was picked up again. But that's a different story.
Ah.